Picture a sealed factory floor somewhere in China, machines running around the clock and coming off the line by the hundreds of thousands. One small black chip, called the Huawei Ascend 950PR. In March of 2026, it entered mass production, and within weeks, it helped do something no Chinese chip had ever done. It pushed Nvidia, the most valuable company in the history of technology, and the company that owned this market, down to 0% share, not falling, not slipping, 0, in the single biggest chip market on the planet. And here's the strange part. The reason it happened has almost nothing to do with how fast this chip actually is. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how Huawei forced Nvidia out of China, how their machine beats Nvidia's best system, while their chip still loses to it head-to-head, and the one decision, made not in Beijing but in Washington, that handed China the entire market. Let us start with the chip. For most of the last decade, if you wanted to train serious artificial intelligence in China, you bought from Nvidia. As recently as 2023, the American company controlled more than 80% of China's AI chip market. It wasn't a competition, it was a monopoly with a logo. Then came the Ascend 950PR. Huawei's newest AI processor entered mass production in March 2026, and according to Financial Times reporting, China's biggest tech giants, Alibaba, ByteDance, and Tencent, had already placed enough orders to push Huawei's AI chip revenue toward a projected $12 billion this year. That's up from $7.5 billion the year before, a 60% jump in 12 months. To put $12 billion in perspective, that's a single company selling more AI silicon in 1 year than most entire countries export in technology of any kind. And it's built around a chip delivering up to 2 petaflops of next-generation compute, paired with 128 gigabytes of high-bandwidth memory manufactured inside China, not shipped in. But the real shock didn't come from Huawei. It came from Nvidia's own chief executive. Standing in front of reporters, Jensen Huang admitted his company's share of the Chinese market had fallen to 0%. Then he went further and said American export policy had largely backfired. Sit with that. The most powerful chip company on Earth, watching a market it once owned outright collapse to nothing. And here's the uncomfortable part. On raw power, the Ascend 950PR still loses to the very Nvidia chip it replaced. Head-to-head, 1 against 1, Nvidia The answer is not inside the chip at all. It's in what Huawei built around it. Which is exactly why what Huawei did next shouldn't work on paper, and yet it does. Start with the problem, honestly stated. A single Nvidia Blackwell B200 chip puts out around 2,500 teraflops of performance. Huawei's comparable chip, the Ascend 910C, manages roughly a third of that. 1 against 1, it isn't close. Nvidia wins, and wins easily. By every normal measure, that should be the end of the story. So Huawei stopped fighting 1 against 1. Instead of building a better chip, they built a bigger machine. It's called the CloudMatrix 384. The name is the spec. It packs 384 Ascend chips into a single connected system. Nvidia's flagship system, the GB200 NVL72, uses 72. Huawei brought more than 5 times as many chips to the same fight. And the math is brutal in its simplicity. As one semiconductor analyst put it, throwing roughly 5 times as many chips at the problem more than offsets each one being only a third as powerful. The result? The Huawei system delivers around 300 petaflops of performance against the Nvidia Rack's 180. The machine, made of weaker chips, on paper, wins. There is a catch, and it is enormous. To do it, the Huawei system draws around 560 kilowatts of power. The Nvidia system draws 145 kilowatts. That is nearly 4 times the electricity to win the same race. In America, that power bill would make the whole approach pointless. But in China, where industrial electricity can cost a fraction of what it does in the West, the math flips. Power is cheap, cutting-edge chips are scarce, so you spend the thing you have plenty of to save, the thing you do not. And every one of those chips is fabricated inside China by SMIC on a 7-nanometer class process built without the single most advanced tool in all of chip making. The EUV lithography machines China is banned from buying. Matching that class of performance without that machine should not be possible in 2026. They did it anyway. But the machine isn't the real story either, because the single decision that actually handed China this market wasn't made in Shenzhen. It was made in Washington. And this is the part the headlines almost always skip. Rewind. In April 2025, Washington blocked Nvidia from selling its H20, the slower, China-specific chip Nvidia had engineered precisely to stay legal under U.S. export rules. H200 into China. The logic, as one Brookings analysis laid out plainly, was to get Chinese companies hooked on good enough American chips so they would never bother building their own and would always stay one step behind. It was a clever plan, and it failed completely. Because when the H200 was finally cleared for sale, China refused to let its own companies buy it. Beijing blocked the imports. U.S. officials confirmed that not a single H200 had actually shipped. And the reason is, the reveal this whole story has been building toward. According to a RAND researcher, Beijing was deliberately using regulatory uncertainty to create a captive market, an artificial demand large enough to absorb every chip Huawei could produce. China didn't out-engineer Nvidia. It legislated Nvidia out of the room and pointed every domestic buyer straight at Huawei. That is why Nvidia's share went to zero. Not because the Ascend 950PR is faster, we have established it is not, but because one government banned the best chips, a second government banned the second best ones, and the only door left open led to Huawei. And here's the implication that dwarfs any single chip. For a decade, America's real advantage over China's AI wasn't better models or smarter researchers. It was a kill switch, control of the silicon, the ability to simply cut off the supply. The export bans were meant to keep that switch firmly in Washington's hand. Instead, they forced China to build its own chips in its own fabs, without Western machines, clustered into its own systems, running its own models. One analyst called it the de-Americanization of China's AI happening in real time. The bans didn't slow China down. They removed America's ability to ever flip the switch again. So what does all of this actually mean? For 10 years, the United States held the most important advantage in the entire AI race. Not the best models, not the brightest minds, but control of the hardware. All of it runs on. Step out of line, and America could turn off the supply. That was the whole game. That advantage is gone. Not because China caught up chip for chip. It has not. But because, in trying to keep China dependent, Washington handed Beijing the one thing it was missing, a reason to build the entire stack itself from the silicon up. The chips are real. The factories are running. The orders are placed. And Nvidia's share of the world's biggest chip market is zero. The export controls were designed to keep China behind. Instead, they built China a door out, and China walked through it and locked it from the other side.